Hello students and welcome to the lecture. So students, as you can see here, that basically in this lecture we are going to start with another important topic of our series, and that is going to be the National Disaster Management Authority. Okay, so in this name only you can see several things. The first thing that you will notice over here is the national. It means that about whatever thing we are going to discuss, that thing is not only limited to certain state, certain region, district and all. Basically, we are talking about the entire country. We are talking about the country in which we are living in the full sense. Second thing that you will notice over here is the disaster. Okay. Disaster, you can say in the layman terms, could be anything that poses a sufficient threat for the human lives and the properties. Okay. After this, management. It means that we are going to talk about the activities, we are going to talk about the set of practices that we do to manage the disaster that could poses a several and a certain threat towards the life of the humans as well as the property. All right. And the last word you can see over here is the authority. It means that we are going to talk about an organization which is at national level and which is doing the work of managing the disaster and saving the human lives as well as the properties of human of the Indian country. Okay, so here I have provided you the input about the topic that we are going to start, but before this I have provided you the input regarding the name itself, like an organization which is at the national level, primarily you can say doing the work to managing a disaster that could poses a threat to the lives and the properties of Indians. All right. Basically, in this National Disaster Management Authority, these are the topics that we are going to see over here. Like starting with the first thing that is going to be a definition. Like first, we will try to understand what is the meaning of disaster. What is the definition of disaster in a proper sense? Because here, if we look at here, whatsoever we are going to discuss is totally centralized on this point. Disaster and its management at the national level by some authority. I'm repeating it. Disaster, the management at the national level by a several authority. So because here the disaster is in the centralized form, so before even understanding the meaning of disaster, how we could proceed, how we could understand the topic as a whole, how we could clarify the doubts, how we could clarify the concept. Okay, so the most basic thing that we are required to do over here is to understand the meaning of National Disaster Management Authority by understanding the meaning of disaster. Okay, first thing, definition. Second, the disasters happened over time in the country of India. Thereafter, what are the causes through which the disaster could happen? Impacts of disaster. Like I have told you, if we talk about the disaster in the layman term, then disaster could be anything, could be any you can say natural cause or artificial or man-made cause that could poses a certain threat to the human lives, okay, their dignity as well as the property. Okay, after this, what are the elements of disaster management in India? Okay, like when we talk about the management of disasters at national level, so how we do it, what are the practices, what are the guidelines that we undergo while managing a disaster? Okay, that is we are going to see in the elements of disaster management in India. So after covering all this, like we will cover the definition, understanding the meaning of disaster, then we will see some disaster that happened over time in India so that you could get an idea. Thereafter, we will understand that what are the causes of the disaster, what caused the disaster. Thereafter, we will try to understand the impact of the disaster. Then, how do we manage it in India? elements of it. After this, we will see the establishment of the NDMA. Finally, we will talk about the NDMA, or in the full form that is known as the National Disaster Management Authority. Okay, like why we established it. Thereafter, we will discuss that when we establish it, so what were our objectives behind the establishment? Like what are the objectives of the NDMA, with which principles and with which vision the NDMA operates in the country. Thereafter, functions and responsibilities assigned to the NDMA in reference to managing the disaster. Thereafter, additional functions of the NDMA, because managing a disaster is not an easy task. Even covering the disaster definition and the managing elements is not possible to the full extent. So that's why there are some additional functions also. We will discuss them. After this, we will discuss about the State Disaster Management Authority. Okay, like if we talk about the thing like National Disaster Management Authority, about which we are going to discuss. At the beginning, I have told you that it is for the management of disaster at the national level, right? But not only at national level we manage the disasters, but also we manage it with the state level as well as at the district level with the help of District Disaster Management Authority. Okay, so these are the topics that we are going to see under this particular series, starting with the definition, disaster happened over time, causes of a disaster, impacts of a disaster, elements of disaster management in India, establishment of NDMA, what are the objectives of NDMA, what are the functions and responsibilities of NDMA, additional functions of the NDMA, the State Disaster Management Authority, District Disaster Management Authority. Okay, so these are the topics. Got it? Now let's move forward. So here is the disaster definition. However, in layman terms, I have already told you like what do you mean by the disaster, but here I'm going to tell it to you through the official way. So basically, if we talk about the formal definition of the disaster, a disaster is an unforeseen, catastrophic event that inflicts several damage, loss, and destruction on both people and the property. Okay, so what did we get from the first sentence that we have seen over here? Like first thing that you can see here is the unforeseen. What is the meaning of it? It means that is unpredictable. No one knows when the things got quite wrong. All right, like suppose, just take an example. You are living in some village, you are living in some area, all right, and today is some date, like suppose there is 2nd January 2002. Today is the date of 2nd January 2002, all right, or we can take the date of 2nd July, not January, 2nd July 2002. What is the date? 2nd July 2002 is the date, all right. After 10 days, suddenly the flood hit the village due to heavy rainfall and failing of some dams or the hydropower projects. So correctly on 12 July after the 10 days 2002, the flood hit the village and caused a huge damage. All right, so what do you think? Suppose there are two scenarios here. First scenario is this: on 2 July you already aware about that there would be a flood on 12 July. That would be cause foreseen event. So if you were already aware, what do you think? The damage that the flood had caused to your village would happen? Would you let your villagers suffer? Would you let your, you can say your fellow members suffer the flood? Would you? No. Why? Because you know the flood would hit the village, not only the people but also the property, and that could affect your livelihood as well, right? So that's why it is said that disaster is unforeseen. It means that no one is already aware about it. No one knows that after several hours there will be some flood. After several days there would be some another kind of thing. No one knows. If the person already aware about it, he will not wait for the thing to be happen. Okay, he will try to find a shelter. He will try to leave the place with the immediate effect. Okay, after this, the second word that we have seen over here, it's the catastrophic. Catastrophic means like causing a huge damage. All right, then only it is known as a disaster. If we talk about flood, the flood not only causes a watering situation in the village, it will obstruct the communication way, it will obstruct the transportation, it will obstruct the, you can say, another ways for you so that you can seek your help, right? It will take the lives, it will damage the properties. Okay, even if we take the example of village, if we are taking it, so in villages we know there is the agriculture, the crops will be damaged, right? So it means that it is the catastrophic, right? Thereafter, after seeing these two words, unforeseen and catastrophic, okay, now we will try to connect it with these things. Like first thing, it will cause damage, okay, to the lives, to the properties. All right. Second thing, loss. Why? Because when the people loses the properties, they are losing the wealth. All right. And even sometimes disaster claims the lives also. Okay. Thereafter, destruction. Destruction means that the normal daily life of the person would be affected. Like if we talk about the village scenario, all right, suppose you are living in a village, and if you are the son of the farmer, what will be your daily routine? You will wake up early, all right, you will go to your fields, you will take care of the crops, all right, you will take care of your livestock, animals which you have domesticated, then you will go to your school, then you will do other kind of works, all right, that will be your daily routine. But when the floods will affect the area, first thing is that you could not go out to your fields like you usually did. Why? Because there was a water. Your livestock would be affected, your animals would be affected, all right, you will lose your crops. Even the another negative side of this is that maybe the floods could injure you, your fellow members and all, and even it could take the lives. All right, so destruction, and this destruction is not only on the people, not on the living beings, but also on the property, right? So that is the first sentence that implements these things. All right, the harm caused by disaster is immense and varies based on the factors like location, like climate, type of terrain, and the level of vulnerability. All right, it means that disasters by simple definition are catastrophic, unforeseen and immense. But how much damage they could cause to a certain place, that is totally depend upon various factors like the location of the place. All right, for example, suppose your village is situated in the radius of 2 kilometers from the river. Okay, in such case, whenever there would be a heavy rainfall, there would be a floods. Okay, and because your village is too close to the river, easily the flood could come to your village and the level of the flood would be higher. Okay, because the water supply would be from the river and the river is nearby your village. Okay, similarly, if we assume your village is not so near to the river, it is approx 6 to 7 kilometers far. All right, so in the heavy rainfall, when the river will overflow the banks, okay, then the water will travel along to reach your village approx 7 kilometers. Then the level of the water would be lesser in comparison with the previous situation of 2 kilometers, right? So when the water level would be less, so the damage to the crops and the properties would be less. Okay. First thing is the location. Second is the climate. Like if you're living in a place, if your village is in the place where the climate is in the form that the rainfall would be heavy, then even it is already a flooding situation, the rain will continue and the flood will become worse and worse, right? So climate also affects type of terrain. If you are living on the hilly slopes, if you are living in the, you can say, harsh terrain, and then the flood hits the village, you could only imagine that what would be a situation. Okay. And the level of vulnerability, it means that how much you could affected by the floods and the other type of disaster that is comes under the vulnerability. All right. So on these factors, basically that is decided like how much damage the disaster could cause to the people and the property. All right. And these events could impact the socio-economic lives. How? Social life, it means that people may lose their lives, people may lose their relatives and all. Okay, social life would be affected. Economic, because the property possessed by the families that would be affected adversely because of the impact of the disaster. All right. Thereafter, political. Yes. How? Basically, many times I have seen people who do not consider the political factor. Okay. They say like how the disaster could cause the political destruction. Disaster is a natural cause. Okay. It is done by the natural environment. Then how could be the political scenarios could be changed? I totally agree with that. Okay. But not in the full sense. Why? Because somehow the disaster also having their impact in the political sphere. And how we can say this? For example, suppose there is a certain area, okay, that is under the governance of some ruling party, that is XYZ. XYZ is the ruling party. Okay. Heavy floods hit the area due to the heavy rainfall. That causes a huge damage to the lives, to the properties. All right. And the ruling party, the XYZ, could not manage it sufficiently. Because of this, people had to suffer a lot. Then what will happen? The opposition parties, like A party, B party, C party, three parties were there, A, B, C. These three parties were started their campaign and then they would blame the XYZ on the failure of disaster management and the damage that had been caused to the people and to the property. All right. Then what will happen now? Put yourself in the situation. You are the resident of that place. Okay. Because of the flood, because of the disaster, your property got damaged a lot. Okay. There is a huge economic loss to you. Your family members, your friends and all, they got injured or even died. Your social life would be affected. Okay. And then you are already under a trouble situation. You are already not in the mental peace. And then you listen through the ABC parties like they were claiming the XYZ got failed in managing the disaster. Okay. So whom do you consider a failure? Would you cause the natural environment? No. I'm not talking about the ideal case. I'm talking about the real scenarios. Okay, practical situation. In the real scenario or in the practical situation, the person would not, you can say, curse the natural environment. Okay. He will curse the ruling government right now because he would consider it as the failure of the ruling government, like they got failed in managing the damage caused by the disaster. All right. So on the basis of this, the political situations also get affected. So we can say disaster could even impacted the political landscape or the political scenario of the certain place. if the ruling party is not so well maintain the disaster causes, then the people would suffer and the people would got dissatisfied with the performance of the ruling party, and then in the next elections they will try it for alternatives. Got it? So political scenarios, that's how got affected. Cultural. How does the cultural things got affected? Basically, cultural things also get affected in the same manner as the political, but not on the same steps. How it could be happen? Like you can say, suppose, have you ever heard about the forest fires? I hope that you have seen it in the televisions, in the social medias and all, right? So suppose there is a jhuming cultivation going on, all right, and there are living several ethnicities. There is a several group of people living in the forest areas, all right. A group, B group, C group and D group. How many groups were there? 4 groups were there, and you can say 4 ethnicities were there, all right. They were living. The ethnicity of C, the C ethnicity, they were practicing the jhuming cultivation. In the jhuming cultivation, what happened? Like the person who is planning to grow some crops, what he will do? He will cut down the trees of the forest. He will make a plain, okay, and he will burn the cutting trees, okay. Then he will collect the ash and spread it over it to the field, and then he will do the cultivation. He would continue it for the several time, and once he will find out the productivity of the soil getting low, he will shifting to the another place, all right, left the field behind. That is called the shifting cultivation and the jhuming cultivation, all right. So the ethnicity of C, they were practicing the jhuming cultivation in their area, all right. And for this, as I had told you, they are required to cut down the trees, burn them, and then spread the ashes over the plot field, okay. So when they were doing this, and it was the summer season, because of the heat and all, when they burnt the trees, suddenly the trees spread the fire to the fallow trees also, and from one tree to another, another to another, and that's how the fire got spread at the large section of the forest and converted into the forest fire, all right. And this is the disaster. Why? Because the forest is the property of all, okay. Not only the forest will affected, even the lives of the wild animals would be affected. Some of them would be dead, some of them would be injured, and some of them would rush towards the cities, okay. And that would affected the lives of people in the cities also. So here you can say, just because of the ethnicity C, ethnicity of A, B and D, all the ethnicities got suffered, right? That is the situation of cultural impact. Like A, B, D would blame ethnicity of C for this, and that could even, in the worst scenario, could be converted into the situation of violence, communal violence, okay, and blame games, right? After this, the mental health, or it is obvious, the person who is suffering a disaster right now, who is losing his loved ones, who is losing his property, what do you think? He would be happy? His mental health will be superb? No, he would be sad. His mental health would be suffering, right? So these are the things that could be impacted by the event of disaster, all right. And disaster could be categorized into the 2 types, like the natural disasters and the man-made disasters, that are also known as artificial disasters, okay. So this is the thing. So students, basically in this lecture we have finished till here, all right. We have seen the formal definition. In the next lecture we will continue with it, all right. Till then, you are required to revise the facts and figures that all we have discussed in this lecture. Be ready for the another lecture. With this note, let's end this lecture, and thank you.